Today we're going to explore corporate lobbying and how it can harm democracy in the United States. Now, you may have heard this term lobbying before, but first I would like to define exactly what it is. Lobbying is the attempt by individuals or organizations to influence the decisions of government officials. Corporate lobbying is when corporations hire lobbyists with the intention of influencing political decisions, typically with their best interests in mind. Corporate lobbying has become an issue due to the astronomical amount of lobbying that they conduct. According to author Lee Drutman, who's also an expert on corporate lobbying, 95 of the top 100 spending lobbying organizations represent corporations. This complete monopolization of the lobbying industry has caused an imbalance in our political scene that detracts from the voice of the people, or the democracy. But where did lobbying all start? When did corporations become so powerful in the lobbying industry? To answer this question, we have to go all the way back to the Bill of Rights. In the First Amendment, it states that the people have a right to, quote, petition the government for redress of grievances, end quote. This has since transformed into this concept of lobbying, or attempting to influence the government. Back in the 1960s, labor unions, public interest groups, and corporations were all similarly represented. Since 1970, however, corporations have been steadily increasing their amounts of lobbying and beginning to take over the political scene. According to a New York Times article from 1970, lobby groups spent $5.1 million lobbying in 1969. In 2017, based on data from the Senate Office of Public Records, the total lobbying spending totaled $3.37 billion. Much of this increase has been due to the surge of corporate spending on lobbying. But many will argue that corporate lobbying is beneficial and even necessary to our democracy. Let me explain that argument and why it doesn't quite work that way. One argument for this position is that lobbying helps government officials gauge public interest in topics and help form their decision based on that information, not just their personal opinions. However, like I mentioned earlier, 95 out of the top 100 spending lobbying organizations represent corporations. This means that the influence on these government officials is completely shifted to one side and does not properly represent the interests of the people. While some may say that having more people means having more influence in the lobbying world, this is not always true. The real key is money. Companies outspend labor unions and public interest groups 34-1 when it comes to lobbying. As a result, they have much more influence in the government. Now that I've talked about some of the other side's arguments, let me explain why corporate lobbying actually hurts democracy in the US. The three major reasons are: 1. Corporate lobbying is damaging the government in the long run. 2. Corporate lobbyists overwhelm congressional staffers to gain power. And 3. Corporations dominate over all other influencers in the political scene. So first, the corporations are damaging the government in the long run. With over 11,500 lobbyists in 2017, the government has built a dependence on lobbyists in order to make decisions on bills. This causes lobbyists to have more and more influence as time goes on. This hurts our democracy because it gives more power to the corporations and prevents the people from having a meaningful impact in the government. Secondly, corporate lobbyists overwhelm congressional staffers to gain power. When a lobbyist appeals to some of these lower-paid, hard-working staff employees, they find that accepting their help is sometimes the easiest thing to do. When a staffer is responsible for researching a topic, the lobbyists may offer insight or maybe even potential solutions to help. However, that information is generally full of bias and specifically targeted to help the corporations that they represent. As a result, the staff were heavily influenced by the corporations and the lobbyists and their side of the story. And that's the key: the influence. Lobbyists will do anything, just like in this example, to get the influence. The third point is that the corporations dominate over all other influencers in the political scene. Now, I've already discussed a few statistics regarding this subject, but I just want to talk about the meaning and the reasons behind those statistics. The interests of the corporation is often valued more than those of the public because of their overwhelming influence. For example, corporations may want to have a complex tax scheme that involves exploitable loopholes and benefits for themselves that may go unnoticed. On the flip side, the public may want tax systems that are simple and understandable. This hurts our democracy because the values that the people hold become underrepresented due to the overpowering of the corporate lobbying. One solution for all the damage being done is to have equal playing field for all parties who engage in lobbying. Limiting the money spent by corporations will potentially violate the First Amendment, so that solution would not really be viable. I think that limiting the sheer number of lobbyists so that the solution would not have to do with money would be the best way to do it. This would allow for equal participation from all different groups. A system similar to that of the House of Representatives and the Senate, where each group gets a baseline number of allowed lobbyists based on their just being there, and then they get more based on how many people they represent, would be an effective solution, in my opinion. Although it's always difficult to find a solution that makes everyone happy, something needs to be done to protect our democracy. Thank you.